So I haven't quite got the whole green screen set up yet. I'm still waiting on Amazon to deliver that, and God only knows when that's gonna be. But I'm sure you guys aren't here to listen to me complain once again. I attempted to make a video the other night, and I ended up talking about a half an hour before I even played the content. On top of that, I don't know if you guys ever heard of this system called OBS. It's an open source system, which means, the community made it and it's free. And it's, best way to describe it, it's badass. It does everything and anything that you would need a system to do. And they say it's easy, but it's not. I literally have gone through blood and sweat trying to get through it. Maybe even some tears from time to time. I know last Friday I was so tired. I ended up sustaining a little injury, and I don't know if you can see it right here. Kind of looks like a big old pimple, but it's not. I I was trying to get this damn system to work, and I could feel myself slowly fading away like I'm gonna fall. And I don't drink alcohol and I don't do drugs, so I'm just exhausted out of my mind, and I could feel myself. I keep on catching myself on the table, on the leg of the table, till finally I just boom. And the older you get, I'm 42 years old. I may not look it, but or I may look it to some, but man, it felt like I busted up my hand. I got like a nice little scar right there. I was just like, are you kidding me? And all week long, like I even went to the urgent care, and they're like, nope, you just sprained it real bad. I'm like, bullshit, it's broken. I don't care about medicine. I know it's broken. It can't be tingling, at the front of my fingers like this for a week. But that's how much I was dedicated to making videos for you guys. And I'm sorry I've been absent for so long. So I'm going to keep this under 20 minutes and hopefully around 10 minutes just to describe where I'm at. 3 people got a chance to see my long, pointless video and the video that looked it looked extremely weird. So you're supposed to set this up in a way where it shows these 3 different screens, and it's hard to explain right now. I can't even wrap it around my head completely. Um, you know, I was working with if anything, I understood mixing boards, sound editing, a lot more than any type of video editing. And mind you, this is we're now in 2022. Back then, yeah, it was a lot more. How can I say? If anybody's familiar with DOS, it's basically program writing is what is DOS was the foundation for how computers are today. Execute, run, program, blah blah blah. Like, it wasn't that antiquated, but it was pretty easy. um so I talked forever, and then I finally played the content, and I had one really nice, user say, uh, being Alejandro fans, definitely open a whole bunch of different types of music. And one thing that I had mentioned was, and I've mentioned this quite a few times, and I hope you guys don't get tired of me belaboring this point, but when I made this channel, obviously I made it because I have a huge, you know, admiration for a freaking amazing, talented artist in Alejandro. And, the last video I posted was Out Loud, his original audition, which still just gives me chills. And what I ended up doing was, um, I was more than happy that, gosh, little by little I started seeing, people were subscribing and have been subscribing. I'm like, man, that's awesome. I never, I, this was all for fun. I never anticipated, people even wanting to listen to me review a song, even from, what I did for, such a long time. Um, of course, I miss the music industry, but I if I had it to do all over again, of course, I would do it all the same way. But what I do it now, it's too hard on a person, my age, unless you're really, right back in an executive role. Traveling, going to different venues. It gets really, really tiring unless you're, like I said, in that executive stage in your career. Um, which I finally got to be, and that was my shortest stint right there, because that's around the time that I retired, got married, and made the biggest mistake of my life. But I don't think you guys could hear that from here with this microphone. No, I mean, marriages are 50-50, and just as much as it is her fault, it was my fault too. No cheating. That's never have, never will. But anyways, that's a whole nother topic. Now, what I had mentioned was my reason for starting the channel was I wanted to discuss and not only just music, but topics that I find very interesting. I love true crime stuff. I love um, conspiracy stuff to a degree. Um, there's a lot of crazy, silly stuff out there that, I'm not going to latch on to just because somebody, a group of people think it's, you know, oh yeah, this is a conspiracy. I'm not going to be one of those people, believing it. But I'll tell you one thing that has always fascinated me because I saw something trippy. We own property in a town called Grand Lake, Colorado. Beautiful up there. Um, and there's probably like I'm gonna do a disjustice by even saying, but I know back then there was probably like only 2,000 residents, not very many. If you look up the Granby incident, it's probably more famous for that. Crazy dude. It's actually on one of these these channels, actually from this channel that I'm gonna play tonight about this story that I want your guys' opinion because it's amazing. But yeah, I seen something trippy that cannot be explained. Um, the gentleman I'm gonna be playing tonight, I'm happy to say that I was like one of his first 100 subscribers. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he started his channel off by discussing what it was like to be a Navy SEAL. And he wasn't seeing the success that he wanted to because it seemed from what I gathered that he really wanted to become a YouTuber. And so he started discussing some topics that he, enjoyed telling during his time as a Navy SEAL. And he always, it's kind of like the motto of his channel, strange, dark, and mysterious. And so he had even discussed, a little after, you know, Navy SEALs are some of the best of the best. I mean, I don't know if you guys heard, but there was a young gentleman who just passed away from Hell Week. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Hell Week, but that's the 2 week period in which the Navy SEALs train, and they get, I believe, a total hours of 8 sleep out of, you know, 2 weeks, which is just crazy. I mean, they torture them to help them, withstand if they were ever captured. I mean, they essentially waterboard them. They do some crazy things that even Mr. Ballen has shown on his channel. Like some of the torture methods where they're playing this dictator who's just ranting, and he keeps on ranting the same thing, and they play it for 24 hours straight, and it drives a lot of people mad. But it goes to show to see how sound in mind they are, and to show you how sound in mind this Mr. Ballen is. I believe his real name is John, but I'll just refer to him by his username, which is Mr. Ballen. He had an incident where a little bit after his graduation from Navy SEAL, one of his best friends, his father died, and they stood at his friend's cabin, where him, his father, and Mr. Ballen all used to go together to go hunting, fishing, all that fun stuff. And while they were there, Mr. Ballen was in the room, and something was in there that he cannot describe that scared the living out of him. And this is a man of sound mind. This is a man who has gone through a lot of training. And, to have something like that scare you is just, yeah. I tend to believe it when it's someone like this. What I saw, it's this huge lake, and one of the coolest things is during the 4th of July, we just lost our cabin. There was a fire, a wildfire, and beautiful cabin. I don't even think it would show up in here if I showed it. Let me see if it will. Bear with me, guys. Until I learn how to set up the green screen once it arrives, yeah, I'm doing it very antiquated. So, let's see. That's me and my little baby. Oh no. There we go. Let's see if I could. Yeah, you're probably not going to be able to see the cabin too well, especially with the glares. I think right there. Yep. Okay, that's me and my little daughter. That's when she was 2.5. I had this beautiful cabin, and it was a place that we just, a place of solace, a place that, the family would go to and just enjoy. Maybe if I flip it, no, not that. Oh, there's the front of the building. Let's see. I don't think it's gonna pick it up that well. Nah, probably not that well. Here was the land and the property. I'm trying to do this with the camera. It's like everything's backwards. So there's the cabin itself, and then the land that we own. And then here was a fire. It's kind of a cool picture, but kind of sad to see. And you can see the Saul cabin off to, it would be my right. So yeah, pretty sad. It was very sad to see all that go, but things happen for a reason, and thank God no one was hurt. There was an elderly couple that did lose their lives, but they just didn't want to leave. They didn't feel like it was going to be. Grand Lake had never undergone any type of an emergency like that, and so I don't think that they really thought something was going to happen. And Sure enough, something did. But anyways, when I was there, can't explain it, but it's this huge lake, huge lake, and it's cool because during the 4th of July, they launch fireworks from the middle of the lake, and because of the surrounding mountains and everything, it's awesome because of the echo. During winter, you could drive snowmobiles on it, you could ice fish, you could do all that, which I went snowmobiling once and was like, nope, I'm good after this. But what I had seen was just, I don't know how something so bright could illuminate a side of a mountain and just stay completely steady and quiet. That blew my mind. And so ever since now the Pentagon comes out and says, "Oh yeah, we don't know what these things are. These smart pilots, you know, have now, we know no other countries are making them. They're called UAFs now, unidentified aerial phenomenon, to get away from the whole UFO, little green men, things of that nature." You know, it's there's a huge interest out there for it. You would look at videos, if you were to type up, UFOs, aliens, whatever. There's millions and millions of views. So these are some of my other interests. Ghosts. I love the topic of ghosts, spirits, things like that. You name it. I'm true crime stories. I mean, I'm all over the board. But, anyways, before I'm already at 17 minutes of speaking. So, without further ado, this one just blew my mind. And as a parent, I don't know what I would do, but it's a, it's just a crazy story. So, um, just a preface, it's an old man. It's the title of it's called "Old Man Makes a Shocking Confession." Um, Again, this is by Mr. Ballen. So, go and leave him the love that he deserves. I'll leave a link on his page, and yeah, I hope you guys definitely enjoy this. Like I said, it's a new little platform, and so yeah, let's see what we get out of it. And I hope you guys, like I said, if you guys have any questions, comments, um, interested in other topics too, music related or not, just let me know. So here we go.
In 2019, a 70-year-old man posted a lengthy confession to Reddit that quickly went viral. And if you make it to the end of today's video, you'll see why. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please deliver a strange, dark, or mysterious story to the like button, but in PDF format. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. On the advice of his longtime therapist, a 70-year-old man named Art began writing about what happened to him and his family 30 years earlier in 1989. His therapist only knew Art had lost a child and felt very guilty about it, but the conditions under which the child was lost was always very gray, even though Art had been his patient for years and the therapist had repeatedly tried to get more information. Was this a child that was lost in pregnancy? Was it a child that was born and died or ran away? Those details never emerged, and every time the therapist tried to dig in, Art would back off, close up, and he would not talk about it. And so finally, his therapist said, "Art, you just need to find a way to talk about this stuff. If you're not going to talk about it with me, then perhaps you should write it all down in a private journal. It'll be a very cathartic experience, and it might help you get over that guilt you're feeling." So Art reluctantly agrees. He goes home, he gets out a piece of paper, and he begins writing all the details of everything that happened leading up to that day in 1989 and what actually happened on that day in 1989. And when he was done and he had a chance to look at what he had written, he didn't feel better. He felt worse. He felt more guilty. But that's because Art had a secret that the therapist didn't know about. And now that it was out on paper, Art suddenly felt like, you know what, before I die, I have to tell the world what me and my wife did. So in 2019, he took all of those notes that he had written down about what had happened and he posted it to Reddit. This is his confession story. Art's son was very, very troubled. Art would say, if you've seen the movie, We Need to Talk About Kevin, where a couple's son turns out to be a total psychopath, Art says that's a pretty good representation of what home life was like with our son. From the day Art's son was born in 1971, it was like something was off about him. Art and his wife Lisa had planned this pregnancy, and they were ecstatic when their baby boy was welcomed to the world, and they showered him with affection and love and did everything they possibly could to give him a warm, loving environment. But no matter what they did, it just seemed like he was always miserable. Their son cried constantly for the first 13 months of his life. Now, Art and Lisa understood that when you bring a baby home, there's a good chance they're going to cry. But his crying was so constant, and he could not be calmed down, that they grew concerned that this was more than just a colicky baby, that there could be some underlying issue. And so they brought their son to doctors and specialists, and they tried every treatment under the sun. They changed his diet, they changed his room, they sang him songs, they changed everything they could, but it never stopped. And so 13 months of grinding, grating, no sleep hell. Finally, in the 14th month of his life, he seemed to get over the incessant crying stage, and Art and Lisa were so relieved. It seemed like finally they could just be loving parents and not be so frustrated with their child all the time. But it seemed like now that he wasn't crying, he still was just totally unhappy. His body language and everything about him said, "I'm not happy." Always. Art said that he never saw his son ever have a genuine, joyous smile. The only time he saw something resembling a smile was when his son would grin after causing someone pain or breaking a rule or in some way being bad. And then once his son started walking, all he wanted to do was just destroy everything in front of him. But again, Art and Lisa, they realized that this is all pretty typical child behavior, albeit maybe on the more extreme end of bad behavior, but it's still in the realm of normal child. And they're thinking that they are the reason this is happening. And so they're not blaming their son at this point. They're still doing everything they can to take care of him and love him to the best of their ability. When their son was about 2 years old, he learned how to take off his diaper. And he began sneaking around the house and emptying the contents of his diaper into corners of the house, underneath carpets, grinding it into the carpet, smearing it on the walls. But again, Art and Lisa are looking inward and saying, our child is only 2 years old. It can't be his fault.
So, being a father, having 3 nieces, having had 3 nieces that were once very young that lived with us while my brother was getting his degrees. We had a fairly large house. They lived in the basement, him and my sister-in-law, and it was just like another house downstairs, and I got to be with my beautiful nieces every single day. I have never experienced nor seen a child do that, with the exception of one, and that was a former, and excuse my language, but shithead little friend I once had who shit all over my bathroom and rubbed it on the walls, just like this little kid, except my friend was 6. This kid is like 2. I mean, for the parents to even think that it's something that they're doing is just, nope. They're not doing anything. Something wrong is already embedded in that child. With my friend, his parents, and the funny thing too is his father, he really didn't know his father that well. I know his father was from Spain. His mother was absolutely beautiful. She was from Japan. His mother and his grandmother were both from Japan. And they were very strict with him, and he was very obedient at home. But it's like, once he got out of the house, it was like, no holds bar. I mean, this little shithead did whatever he wanted, and he did a lot of stupid crap. And I just hope, he's living a happy, healthy, clean lifestyle. But for these people to even feel like their 2-year-old rubbing shit, from their diaper on the wall was somehow their fault. Yeah.
He's acting this way. It's our fault for not finding a way to correct this behavior. But Art and Lisa started to drift away from that opinion when their son got a little bit older, got potty trained, and wasn't using diapers anymore, and still was going around the house and squatting down and going to the bathroom all over the house, making a mess at every possible chance he could. And not just when he was 4, 5, 6 years old. All the way up until he was 15 years old, he was doing this. And he stopped doing it in random corners, and he began only going into his parents' bedroom every chance he got, opening up the sheets, going inside, going to the bathroom, shutting it back up, and leaving. It got to the point where Art and Lisa literally could not stop their son from doing this. He was absolutely determined to do this. So anytime they were away, he would even sneak in the windows to do this. I mean, he was totally hell-bent on going to the bathroom in their bed. And so they had to start putting locks on the windows and the doors of their bedroom.
That's just pure hatred. Pure hatred of, you know, those who are putting clothing on your back, food on your table, you know, your mother who has given birth to you, your father who has, you know, of course played a big role in that. Can a child be inherently born just evil? I mean, I have, and I always call her little, and she's not, but I have such a beautiful cousin who is, I'm 42, she's 40 years old, and she has, on the high end of things, she has real bad cerebral palsy, where I always say that my father made amends at the end was working with her, because she has the mentality of perhaps a 1 to 2 month old, and before my father passed away, she all she could do was clap to show that she was happy, and of course cry when she was, you know, sad. But my father actually started working with her so much that she started saying hi and bye, and it was so wonderful to see. And she's in hospice right now, and it sucks. Yeah, it's been a sucky weekend. I didn't want to talk about this too much, but my aunt, uh, she passed away this morning, and she's been in hospice now for a week, and she was a fighter, and she hung in there, and she passed away. And my cousin at the same time, Marissa is her name, and you know, that cerebral palsy, I'm just, you know, that little girl's had a tough life. But anyways, let's get back in this video, because that's just, it's a whole nother story. It's a sad story. And sorry for all this background sound. Now that the weather is getting all nice outside, all these fools are driving their bikes and their loud cars. And I live a street over from a really busy street, so.
But when they had finally secured that room to where he really couldn't get in anymore, he began going to the bathroom right outside their door and in the other beds in the house. And so they began investing in locks on all of the doors. They even replaced the doors themselves because they were too flimsy, and they thought there's a good chance he might kick these doors in to try to get them open. So they put these big, thick doors up all through their house and put these big locks with key locks all over the house to keep their son from going in and going to the bathroom all over their bed sheets. As their son grew older, he became more and more unmanageable, well beyond just going to the bathroom in different places. He became violent, and he would bite and kick and scratch and spit on anybody that came near him. He was like a wild animal. Before he was 9 years old, he had been kicked out of school 2 separate times. When they let him back in a third time, he apparently did something that was so bad that they effectively expelled him. A 9-year-old is getting expelled from school. So they had to enroll him at this other special school that would accept him with his history. But part of the deal with this school is you don't have any interaction with other students. He was considered too dangerous to be around other kids. So he was totally isolated at school, and it ultimately made him a lot worse.
And I was going to say the exact same thing. You know, there's a proven fact, and, you know, I know that as we get older, you know, our brains are like sponges. You know, we're taking in, and like I said, this kid has already, he's already messed up in a sense. And is he God, is he recoverable? I mean, is that even a makes sense? I mean, can he be saved? Excuse me, I'm drinking carbonated drinks. Yeah, who knows if he could be saved or not? But it is a proven fact that when they have people in what do they call it? They throw people in the hole. Damn it, what is it called? Um, when they make sure that when they isolate like prisoners from other prisoners, I mean, it is shown to do more damage to them mentally. Or segregation, that's what it is. When they segregate, the prisoners from other prisoners. I mean, it's been shown to be so harmful, and to do that to a young kid who is going through all this stuff that he's going through, and look what's happening. I mean, it's just, yeah, that's not probably the best idea. Solitary confinement. That's the name. I'm sorry. That's the name I was looking for.
Once he was enrolled in the school, he became really violent at home. He would come home from school and he would go right to the kitchen and get a knife out, and he would start threatening his parents, to the point where they had to lock all the drawers in the kitchen. Once all of the knives were under lock and key in Art's house, his son began stealing knives from the neighbor's house, smuggling them back into the house, and at night he would pull them out and try to stab Art. And on 2 different occasions, he was successful, and Art still has scars on his leg from it. And Art's son was not just attacking his parents. He was also turning on local animals that were helpless.
We know
He
what that
blinded one of
signs
the
of.
local dogs that was running around the area by just stabbing it in the eye one day. He went after one of the stray cats and he lit its tail on fire. And honestly, Art doesn't even know the other damages he had done to other animals or even other people. Even though Art and Lisa massively resented their son for how badly he treated them and how difficult he was making their lives, they recognized that this was a child that needed help. And so they tried everything they could to help him by enrolling him in that special school that ultimately was isolating, but it was an attempt to try to help him, or bringing him to different therapists and psychologists and doctors, putting him on different medications and bringing him to meditation consultants. I mean, you name it, they tried everything they could to try to help this kid, but nothing worked. He only got angrier and got bigger and stronger and more aggressive and violent. And eventually Art and Lisa are like, what do we do about this? What ultimately started happening over the following years is Art and Lisa became prisoners of their own home. That every time their son was around, they felt unsafe around him. He was such a wild card, and he had these crazy, angry outbursts, and he was clearly prone to extreme violence. And so they began using those heavy doors and locks to lock themselves away from their son. It was the only way they felt safe. And so with that in mind, fast forward to 1988, when Art's son is now 16 years old, and Art and Lisa find out they're pregnant again. It was a surprise, and they were not happy about it. In fact, because of how badly it had gone with their son, they were really scared that another child was going to be just as bad, and they couldn't possibly go through this again. And so they decided that they weren't going to terminate, but if they noticed early on this child was a huge problem child, as horrible as they felt about it, they knew they would give it up for adoption. They simply couldn't do this again. This time they had a daughter, and she was normal. She was nothing like their son. She didn't come home and cry constantly. She smiled and laughed, and after a few months she was sleeping through the night, and she was hitting her milestones, and she just seemed happy, and she was easy. And it was around this time that Art and Lisa began to realize just how bad their son was. Seeing how wonderful their daughter was just amplified all of their son's atrocious behavior over the first 16 years of his life. And so Art and Lisa really began to look at their son as more of a lost cause. And they were less invested in going through the motions to try to find some way to help him when they knew it wasn't going to work. It had never worked. And he's only a couple years away from being 18, and he can go out on his own and figure it out for himself. And now, since they didn't really care as much about him, suddenly his behavior was intolerable. And anytime he acted up, they would never lay a hand on him, but they were not afraid to tell him to basically get the F out of here. We are not putting up with this. Leave. And so regularly, Art and Lisa would have these horrific screaming matches with their son until their son would basically run away in a rage and then come back hours later or even a couple days later. And Art said he began to look forward to fighting with his son because every time they fought, it meant his son would be gone for a little while afterwards and there would be a little bit of peace and calm inside the house. But at the same time, Art and Lisa were concerned one of these days he's going to come back in after one of these fights and he's going to kill us. So it went on like this for about a year until a rainy day in 1989 when their son was almost 18 and their daughter was almost 1 year old. Now the house they lived in was a single-story bungalow and their daughter's room was against a sidewall where there was a window leading to the outside. That morning, Art and Lisa had got into one of the worst screaming matches with their son they'd ever had. And he left in a rage and they slammed and locked the door behind him. After a couple of hours, their son is still gone and they don't expect to see him anytime soon. And their daughter is starting to get fussy, she seems tired, and so they walk into her bedroom, they put her in her crib for a nap, and then Art and Lisa leave her room, shut the door behind them, and go sit down in the kitchen. A couple minutes later, they hear their daughter screaming at the top of her lungs. And Art and Lisa immediately recognize this is not an ordinary cry. This sounds like something is terribly wrong. They get up and sprint down the hall to a room and they try the door handle, but it's locked. They run back out to the kitchen, they get the keys, they go back, they're fumbling with the keys, they finally open it up, and there in the back of the room, standing next to the crib, is their son. He's holding a knife and he's poking it into her face.
No.
And Art said he looked at his daughter and he could see blood on her stomach and blood on her arm, and she's screaming, and so he thinks to himself, thank God she's still alive. And instinctively, Art starts running to try to put himself between his son and his daughter. But before he could even get there, his wife had moved much faster, and she charged over and smashes her son's hand. The knife falls to the ground. She pushes him as hard as she possibly can, and he goes slamming into the wall and falls on the ground. Art immediately reaches into the crib, picks his daughter up, and runs to the other side of the room. And he kind of looks her over. She's crying, she's in pain, she's scared, but he can see the cuts on her are superficial. He turns back around and he can see his wife is standing there with her fist balled, standing in front of her son. Her son stands up and he's looking at her, no emotion on his face. Art would even say that it was like he was looking at an alien. This person wasn't human. How could they do this to their own sister, to a baby? And he stared at him, and then he noticed his wife was moving towards her son like she was going to attack him. And this is where Art says he knew he was supposed to go over there and stop whatever was about to happen. But he didn't. And this is the part of the story where Art reveals his wife, she's this amazing boxer. And he knew that she could beat the living crap out of just about anybody. The son is so stunned by how quickly this has happened that he's not doing anything. He's not positioning himself to fight back or to even preemptively attack his mother. He's just kind of standing there looking at his mother with no expression on his face. And that's when Art's wife winds up and blasts him across the face, knocking his head back.
You know, it's kind of true. It's that saying, you know, I brought you into this world, I could take you out.
And Art said immediately he could tell his nose was broken, blood squirts all over his face, and he falls to the ground. Until this moment, neither Lisa nor Art had ever laid a hand on their son. Even when he stabbed Art twice in the legs, they never physically struck their son. But this was different. Their son had crossed the line and he could never come back. And so even though Art knew if he doesn't step in, his wife is going to beat their son to death, even though he knew that was going to happen, he remembers thinking, good. He turns around and he leaves the room with his daughter. As Art cleans up his daughter and puts band-aids on each of the cuts that were inflicted on her, he hears in the other room his son is yelling and screaming at their mother, saying, I'm going to kill you. And she is just ruthlessly punching, kicking, and smashing him. It is not slowing down at all. And Art remembers by the time he picked his daughter back up, after putting all her band-aids on and she'd kind of calmed down, he still heard his wife punching, kicking, and smashing their son, who's now unconscious. Again, Art knows, if I don't go in there now, my unconscious son is getting his head kicked in by his mother. If I don't go in there now, he's gonna die, for sure. But Art wants that to happen, so he doesn't go in there. Instead, he just rocks his daughter until she falls asleep, and by the time she's snoring in his arms, his wife is still punching, kicking, and smashing their son, who hasn't made a sound in a long time. Art just sits down at the kitchen table, hoists his daughter onto his shoulder, and just listens for his wife to finish what she's doing. And finally it does go quiet in there, and his wife emerges from the room, and she's covered in blood. Her hands are swollen and red, and her chest is heaving like she's been running a race. She comes into the kitchen and sits down at the table next to Art and looks at him, and he looks back at her, and he just says, "Is he dead?" She says, "I hope so." And he just goes, "Yeah, me too." Art and Lisa sat at the kitchen table for a long time. There was no sound coming from the room where their son was. And eventually Lisa starts crying and goes and takes a shower. At which point Art stands up and he goes into the bedroom where his son was. And this is when he can tell his son is actually still alive. He walks in and he can see his son still breathing, but he's covered in blood. He's got vomit on him. He's clearly wet his pants. His teeth have been knocked out. His whole face is bloodied and bruised and swollen. And he goes up to him and he thinks there's no way he's going to live through this. But Art has kind of an internal crisis because he wants him to die. He doesn't want him to live. And so that decision of should I call an ambulance or should I call police was a really difficult one to make because really neither served the purpose that he or his wife wanted.
Before I go into all my talking like I normally do in this video, I've already made twice as long. That was my very first question is how would you feel? What would you do?
And so as he's standing there wondering what to do, he hears his wife come out of the shower. And so he leaves the room and he confers with his wife and they decide, we're not going to call the police. We're not going to call an ambulance. We're going to do nothing. And so right then and there, they walked around their house, they gathered up a couple things, and they headed downstairs into the basement where they had an in-law suite, which basically was a little apartment that they didn't really use, but it had everything they needed. And they moved down there, and they locked the one door that led down there, and they locked the side door as well. They figured if he lived, there would be enough food to get him through a few weeks upstairs. There's water up there, bedrooms, bathrooms. He had all of that. And at some point, he would run out of food, and he would have to leave. Or he would die upstairs, and in a couple weeks, they would go up, and they would deal with it. Over the next week, they began to hear movement upstairs, which signaled to them he was alive, but he wasn't moving around much. It was just enough to know somebody was up there. They figured that, okay, he's probably laying down most of the time recovering. And so Art began going back to work. He would go out the side door, and every time he went outside, he was in the driveway, he was expecting his son to come out and attack him, but he never did. And his wife, Lisa, she stayed with their daughter 24/7, stayed in the house, and at no point did the son ever try to come downstairs and try to attack her or them at any point. Probably because he was afraid of his mother. About 3 weeks after the attack, they were in bed in the basement and they heard him going absolutely ballistic upstairs, screaming, punching walls, breaking things, and they decided, you know what, whatever he does up there, it's not worth going up there and confronting him. Let him do whatever he wants. And then the next day, it was totally quiet. And for the next couple of days, Art and Lisa would listen really intently to see if they could hear him moving around upstairs, but they couldn't. And so finally, Art and Lisa decide to go up into the main floor and see if he's up there. When they open the door, they find their entire upstairs has been absolutely wrecked. Every piece of furniture is ruined, every window's broken, there's glass all over the place, there's brown smears all over the walls, but their son isn't there. And so they figured that night when they heard him going crazy upstairs, he already knew he was going to leave. He just wanted to ruin their house before he did. Even though their son was gone, they had no idea if he was going to come back or not. And so for days and weeks and months, they lived in fear that their son was just going to show up one day and kill them. But he never did. And then 3 years after the incident, they moved, and they weren't in contact with their son. They hadn't seen him, and so he had no idea where they were going, and they have no way to contact him, so that was it. They just restarted somewhere else. Fast forward to 2019 when Art is making this Reddit post, and he says, I haven't seen my son since 1989, and I don't want to see him again. And Art goes on to say that while he hopes his son was able to overcome his demons and live a normal life, he said if he wasn't able to do that, if he was out there still causing pain and misery to other people, Art says he hopes that whoever was on the receiving end of that finished the job and killed him. So that's going to do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you found the secret, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it, what's the timestamp. And if you're the first one to do that accurately, we will pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please deliver a strange, dark, or mysterious story to the like button, but in PDF format. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications.
So go on and show Mr. Ballen some love for today's story. It's just such an interesting story. He's an awesome storyteller. And what he did was very, very clever. I haven't seen him doing it in a while, so I don't know if somebody, said, "Oh, I started that first," out of jealousy or some BS. But what he did was he would put little. Usually they would be, like signs, like thumbs up, and they would be like in. Because most of his stories they don't have videos attached. Every once in a while he'll throw an actual an actual photo, but it's just a photo. Like, he could be talking about a murder spree, but it's not a photo that would show anything. Excuse me, show anything graphic. It would just be like a random photo. But he would often have the button like show up in some random spot, almost like finding Waldo, and it got a lot of people to. I mean, as soon as his videos came on, like boom, people were looking for the hidden secret right away, and I mean, you would see like the first like 80 comments like. I found it, and this person's like, "Oh, I already found it at this mark, this mark, this mark," and people like, "How the hell did you find it so quickly?" I mean, so it kind of became a running thing, and so he hasn't done it in like maybe 30 videos or so, but most of his videos, and the reason why unfortunately you guys had to stare at my ugly mug, is because it's just basically him doing the same thing I am, except he has his green screen and just has like a brick wall looking background, and it's just sitting there telling the story. So yeah, like I said, no pictures, no anything to his stories, just very straightforward. And so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think. And again, sorry I went so long. I'm gonna start learning how to keep this shorter. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it, and hope you have a wonderful evening. I'm gonna pump out a couple more videos, and I hope you enjoy them. So you'll see me soon.